We're not taking away people's jobs. I think there's a huge part to say AI should be there as an enabler, as an overlay, but never to replace the human element. We want the people who are professional trained carers to be able to put more time into care through helping and supporting them, rather than saying, actually, we're going to do your job for you. So that should never be the case. That human overlay is the sort of critical part of it, and allowing people the time and the energy to do what they want to do.
Hello and welcome to the Health Automated podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mark Tops, and I'm glad to be joined here today with Jack White and Stephen Morris. How are you both?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm all good. Thanks, Mark. All good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Busy, but good. So yeah, I can't complain.
Excellent. Excellent. How are you finding the weather at the moment? Is your office geared for it?
I don't think my office is geared for too much. I was revealing a minute ago I'm currently stood in a toilet recording this, so of all places, but fun and games because there's so many people in today. But yeah, no, it's all good. So do you know what? I quite liked last night, just being able to sit outside and enjoy the warmer evenings. So yeah, it feels like a long time since we've been able to do that.
I agree. It's definitely that time of year. Yeah. So for that 1 week of decent weather we get in the UK per annum, you know, it's nice to take advantage of it. Although I'm like a reptile, my wife, like, she loves having fans on in the room at night, so I always feel like I'm freezing even if it's 30 degrees outside. But hey, but yeah, how about you, Stephen? You all good?
I'm good, yeah. I've been enjoying working at home this week with all the patio doors open. In fact, I even had one indulgence. I had a barbecue for breakfast last Sunday.
Nice.
I woke up and went, it's a beautiful day, fired up the barbecue, put sausage and bacon on there, and I thought, you know what, I feel thoroughly Australian. A Sunday morning breakfast on a barbie. I thought, you don't get that in England in April, do you?
We need to speak to you about a good work-life balance, because I barely have time to chuck a bowl of cereal together and get out the door.
It was Sunday. It was Sunday, wasn't it? Wasn't it? Yeah. No, yeah. I'm not overreaching myself.
You mean you don't work Sundays? And what is this word breakfast you speak of?
I'm just checking my boss can't hear. Yeah, it's okay.
No, well, thank you for joining us, Stephen. So, yeah, well, like usual, we're here to talk about all things AI and tech social care related. So, first of all, tell us a bit about the blog you wrote with Mark. I think our listeners would love to sort of read that. So we'll put that link into the media with this as well.
Yeah, no problem. I think we all know there's so much noise around AI and its applicability and how you use it. And obviously, being English, the first thing we do is we're scared to death of it being compliant and it's stealing all of our data. And, you know, but everyone feels as though there's a bandwagon to be jumped on there. There's something I'm missing out on. I should be using AI somehow in my business. And so that kind of leads people often to then start to look at, well, where and how. And there's, again, you look at the organizations who are starting to use AI, they're bringing in consultants and people with very hefty costs attached to them to help them design and bring this to life, which within the social care sector, that's not entirely appropriate. And so our experience with Quik AI is we're owned by Rose Care Group, which is got 10 care homes, around 300 staff down in the southwest. And we noticed that there are a number of fundamental problems with the business. There's this huge amount of data that's being collated with the use of some beautiful care planning systems. There's severe staffing shortages, which are very difficult. There's a significant increase in patient acuity and the level of compliance. Even things around processes. If you look how long it takes to check someone in as a new resident 5 years ago versus today, it's significantly higher. So you've got all of these sort of conflation of pressures and challenges where compliance is higher, staffing pressures are there, huge amounts of data and information, and that leads to things breaking and not quite working as efficiently. So we looked at AI as a way of trying to solve some of those issues. which is ostensibly what the blog is about. It's saying, okay, well, rather than thinking about AI as this big amorphous thing, how do I implement AI? Think about actually what problems do I have in my business? What would I really like to solve? And could AI help me with that? And we found, not universally, but to a high degree, yes, it can. Can it automate many of the tasks that I do myself that take a long time? Yes, it can. Can it help me collate information from multiple sources and bring it together in a much shorter, more efficient way? Yes, it can. Can, by doing that, it allow me more time to plan, to think, and to execute what's going to improve my business rather than spending all the time doing these manual tasks? And so by approaching it from the point of what do we want to solve, we actually got to quite a decent product set of things it can help solve, which are very practical, because we're not taking away people's jobs. I think there's a huge part to say AI should be there as an enabler, as an overlay, but never to replace the human element. We want the people who are professional trained carers to be able to put more time into care through helping and supporting them rather than saying, actually, we're going to do your job for you. So that should never be the case. That human overlay is the sort of critical part of it, and allowing people the time and the energy to do what they want to do.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds like quite a good product there. And I think you've hit the nail on the head when you've described what the initial goal that you was trying to achieve was as an organization, looking at the data sources you have, ways to improve efficiency, and sort of essentially remove what we'd say like the human in the middle approach, where possible, to try and increase that productivity, which is a fantastic way of looking at the problem you're trying to solve. And I agree with what you said right at the beginning, where it's like it's a bandwagon term, sheep factor. We hear that term AI and everyone thinks, well, my competitors are using it. I don't know why or how they're using it, but I must use it as well. So I sound like I'm staying ahead. And it's a snazzy sort of word at the moment, a buzzword, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I find a lot of companies don't know what the problem they're trying to solve is before they try and apply AI. They try and fit a problem around the AI solution instead of trying to find an AI solution for the problem. And realistically, a lot of the businesses don't sit down and analyze where their bottlenecks are. So where am I struggling? Reporting and compliance is a notorious bugbear for a lot of registered managers. It's widely known that a lot of companies are fantastic at the care delivery, but some of them aren't up to standards with the documentation. Now, is that a educational problem? Is that a willingness to not comply, a rebelliousness, if you will, or is it time management and efficiency? So it's got to sit within a remit of somewhere around that way of working. Now, as a small business owner, I've always found the admin side is the part I least enjoy, and I have to really be in the mood to do admin work. So, I have to really put it into my planner to make sure that I do it. So knowing I wouldn't be alone in that thought process like many other individuals, and I've said this before on many of the podcasts, a lot of the business owners, especially the small business owners, are fantastic people, but they probably didn't start their career with the aspiration of being a business owner, excuse me, and wearing all of them hats. They wanted to care and then deliver a care service, and everything else came as a secondary sort of skill set. And looking at ways to automate and improve that efficiency where there's skill gaps and resourcing issues is paramount. And an example there would be using artificial intelligence to gather all of that data, generate reports for you, automate that, and look for any sort of differences which you would expect and flag them. Because that would save you a lot of time as a person instead of the old school way of working about 10 years ago, and even to this day for some providers, and those that are, shame on you in this era, 2025, having to go out and collect the paper from door to door, for an example, in a home care service. So you look at the time wasted on the human level, you look at the risk factor of putting a human out on the roads with the risk of probability of an accident or something like that, traffic delays, what happens if the car gets broken into while that person stops and the rest of the data stolen. All of them risk factors can be overcome by using a digital system. And it's balancing in certain aspects on how you as a business wish to operate. And I think, Stephen, what you've done there is fantastic, where you've managed to find a way to pull all of that data from multiple areas of the business and bring it into one central point, which is key. Because it's pointless having all of these intelligent systems if none of them talk or produce a similar baseline of data.
I think there's another overlay as well, which is kind of a note of caution, is that AI is a probabilistic model by its very nature. So what you don't want is to introduce that element into your business when you're caring for people, because you need consistency. It has to fit to specific templates, specific processes, specific procedures, and it's a regulated industry as well from a compliance perspective. So I think one of the dangers of doing something which is generic, for example, ChatGPT or any one of the other LLM providers, is that you are doing something which is not tailored to your business. So you're getting some of the advantages around, say, care plan rewrites or various aspects of helping to improve things which would have taken you time, but it's uncontrolled. It doesn't sit within the kind of guidelines that organization has set out of what their standards are, or what the CQC states, or what NICE or SKI or anybody else does. So I think there's by not putting some sort of level of thought into that and to the controls that sit around it, there is a risk that AI creeps into your organization, and rather than helping, it actually creates more risk because it's not controlled.
That's an extremely valid point. And this is something that Mark and I have stressed many a times, and especially using open source LLMs. When it comes to AI and the application of it being used in the work environment, an AI is a very niche tool. It has to be trained in a way that works around your business. It understands your business and like intelligence, your data flows, your ways of working. And even to this day, there is not a one size fits all approach that would cover all businesses, because they all operate with slightly different local authority regulations and ways of working, even down to their billing and invoicing requirements, and payment terms and so forth. And containerization is key, ensuring that organizations work with a reputable provider that has a AI-based model that can be adapted to their workflows, instead of taking something off the shelf and saying we've put a chat bot that, for instance, can read what you've got on the screen, but it's not really giving you any more intelligence than what could be given to some, and it's got to understand, for example, one of our enterprise customers, they've got over 300 employees, but they cover the whole of the UK. And they have different billing structures on even how they bill private customers per region. To try and apply that with a standard off-the-shelf AI would not work, because it wouldn't understand how to break that data down, tag that to the right regions, clusters, and billing environments. And this is an example of exactly what you're saying. With the rush to implement, it can cause hindrance, because some people say we've bought an AI, but it's not actually doing what we need it to do. And actually what they start to then do is blame the software.
Yes.
Because it's easier to blame the software, because they don't understand that the AI is working in an algorithmic based flow. And it's working on a model of, if yes, is this happening, and what do I need to get to X, Y, Z? And if they're not working into that flow of the AI, they will encounter problems. And as you say, it's a statistical based model. We would expect an AI to be 100% accurate at all the times, because it's computer based, but that's not the case. They're only as good as the data that's using them, and consistency, as you said, Stephen, is key. If you're not plugging in data from one week to another and then coming back to it trying to expect it to predict your next week's rotas, it's not going to work.
No.
And this is where I'm sure Mark would agree, because Mark, I believe your organisation's dabbling in the realms of AI within certain capacities, aren't they? What efficiencies are you guys using internally to try systems to try and improve efficiency? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think for us, we're local authorities, so we have to be really mindful, obviously, that we're governed by, obviously, their policies, procedures, as well as our own. And I think for us, it's around how we can safely use it, but to save time on our operational staff to be able to deliver more time with the customers as opposed to anything else, is what we're trying to use it at the moment. And I think one thing, just listening to the conversation, I think it's all good, is that I think what we're seeing at the moment is the majority of providers aren't using a supplier that is built on an AI model. They're just using, Copilot or Grok or ChatGPT or something. And I think they're probably not using a paid version, they're using the free version as well. And I think that they're kind of, I think my worry when I see that is what they're doing with their data, but also the risk to their business. And I think that's one thing we're very mindful is that we don't want to cause any kind of risk in terms of to our customers, to our staff, to brand reputation. And actually, what does that look like? And I think, I've seen even in the last week, people talking about, let's use it for policies, let's use it for procedures, let's use it for, your care planning, those generic things that I think now that we know social care is kind of always seems to be about a year, 2 years behind the curve. I think it's only just coming onto people's radar. And I think they're at that stage using that generative AI as opposed to thinking, actually, I would be better off going with an organization that, so for example, Health Automated, I think people at the moment will be building care plans out the back of ChatGPT as opposed to thinking, why don't I go with a new digital supplier that has an AI model for my care planning? And I think that's the learning. And I think when Stephen reached out to me and put that blog together, it was just very, well, it was originally a conversation. I just thought it was a very honest conversation from a supplier's point of view. But then the blog was very transparent and kind of just hit home about actually what are we all doing and what are we trying to achieve. And yesterday, Stephen and I caught up very briefly around actually how we measure success. And I think that's a good point to kind of lead to, because I don't think listening here and many people implementing kind of AI models or whatever they're trying to achieve, don't think they'll be measuring the success. And I think there's a lot of providers, even when I typed it in on the Facebook groups earlier, talking about, well, it's not saving me any time and I haven't saved like an admin role. And they're probably not either implementing something correctly or either putting something right at the beginning so they can measure that success.
I think, putting measures in place is part of it, isn't it? Because it helps you understand what does success look like. Because if you have a problem, then you can quantify that problem. We are not spending enough time doing this, or we're spending too much time doing something we shouldn't be doing. And also it depends on your point of inflection. Are you looking at back office operational process procedures such as invoicing, billing, procurement, or are you looking at things which are for the frontline staff? So again, it's just having that clarity of do I want to bring efficiencies in the way my business operates, or do I want to bring efficiencies in the way care is delivered? Now, both obviously run hand in hand, but ultimately you've got more risk when you're talking about the care planning element versus, for example, automating an invoice into a procurement system. Both have benefits, but very different ways to look at it. And I think the other part of it as well is being able to monetize the risk of not doing it. So if we know if you fail on a CQC audit, what are the ramification implications of that? And you can monetize that. And if you understand what that's going to cost your business, from a drop in occupancy rates, reduction in revenue, increase in your legal bills, increase in consultancy fees, it perhaps focuses the mind a bit as to why you ought to do this. It's not always just about saving money. It's about removing the potential risk and cost associated with things going wrong.
See, I'm going to say something controversial here. I think AI should replace some jobs. I genuinely do. And where people say it shouldn't be seen as a way of replacing and it should be there as like subsidizing, I disagree in some capacities. You look at history, we've used technology to replace certain roles over time. You used to have people being like, shall we say, plowmen on a farm on horseback. Now you have tractors, now you've got automated tractors in some places, and as part of natural progression, if we're looking at ways to improve efficiency and streamline processes, sometimes having a human does complicate them processes. A human has annual leave, a human has sickness, a human has working time directives that we have to adhere to. Sometimes we have to have 2 or 3 humans to do the same job, and they won't all operate at the same capacity or level. And where we've got a task that can truly be automated, why do we need to put a human in that role? That human skills can then be repurposed into a completely another area or skill set for the business and actually enhance their role significantly. And we have to look at certain other factors as well. Does an AI get stressed? When I'm stressed, I'm prone to making error. Are you? Is everyone else?
Yeah.
We talk about work-life balance. If I have an AI that can do 90% of my workload for me, so I've just got to start reading reports and validating data and interjecting here or there, great. I've got my work-life balance. The company is going to see increased efficiency because I'm essentially 900% more effective than I was because I'm doing it all the time in the background and I've only got that 10% factor. That, if worse comes to worst, I'm easy to replace. You haven't got to train me in all these processes to get the data, and I haven't got to know how to look at all the different systems to find it. I can just see the same data that someone else was analyzing. So you've got good standardization. But realistically, we're looking at some of the other elements that are coming in. For instance, look at Gemini on Google. It can screen your calls for you. It can signpost people through. So why do you need someone essentially working front of house now answering telephones when you've got an AI chatbot that can do that for you 24/7, 365 and route them highly efficiently? And you've got to look at modernization and moving with the times, because sometimes we try to use modern approaches and still try and put an antiquated viewpoint on there. And people go, job losses, job losses. It's not job losses. It's not. You're actually having a more dynamic workforce that can work across multiple areas of the business with less stress. And that will actually increase your human efficiency. Because if AI is doing a lot of the tools, that means people can be more dynamic and work across multiple areas because they're still getting the same business intelligence. And I genuinely feel that we have to sort of change the vernacular sometimes on how we do approach, because we don't want to replace jobs. We're not saying replace carers or admins or emotions. We're not saying replace any of that. But if my business wants to be effective, it needs to operate more efficiently and for longer hours at times. Look at a support team 24/7, 365 on a digital system. So businesses work efficiently as they can. And we wouldn't be able to operate as efficiently as we could, especially in out of hours without the uses of AI. So one would argue that's actually replaced some jobs because we don't need more staffing in the out of hours times because it gets done in other ways. And I think this is the way technology is going. The human isn't designed for manual labor as such, are we? Although we do it, we're not genuinely designed, because after a couple of years of doing it, we go, my back hurts, my knees hurt, start falling apart. And if we can start to get like systems that do this for us, it's not that we'll lose the skill set as a human on how to do things like generating an invoice. It's just if we know that a system's going to do it with a lot more vigilance, efficiency, it's going to be on time every time. As a business owner, I don't need to worry about that. You just see what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just my viewpoint on it. It's slightly controversial.
But you said at the beginning, sorry, just quickly, you said at the beginning, the bit you hate most about your job is the admin. And if you ask most people that, they say that. So then if you say, I'm going to take away the admin, then there's got to be something which says, well, if I'm taking that away, what happens? There's going to be a consequence of that, isn't there? Sorry, Mark.
No, you don't have to apologise. I mean, I'll be controversial. I love admin jobs. I love that kind of repetitiveness, so I'll happily do that. It probably is a controversial viewpoint in terms of what you've spoken about, but I don't think it is. I think it's just diversification in terms of what is due to come. I think some of that is a realism for people that actually this is coming, but actually what does your future planning look like? And I think because we're in that sheep mentality of, oh, they're doing it, let me do it, nobody's actually thinking, oh, where do we want to be in the next 5 years? Where do we want to be in the next 10 years or whatever? I think it is slightly hard because technology is moving so fast. But I think for us as an organisation, we've said, actually, if we implement this, okay, there might be an admin that, leaves the organisation, but actually we can increase a data analyst role here and have somebody in that. So whilst you're losing one role, you're gaining somebody else. And actually in that time period, could your admin upskill to become somebody that's an expert with data? I think also it's around expectations of what you want to achieve. So I think one thing, I was on a meeting the other day with loads of directors, and they were talking about chatbots in terms of that they had implemented. A lot of them were talking about websites, but there was a couple that had implemented like the registered manager chatbot, where your staff can contact that as opposed to your registered manager, and talking about, well, I haven't seen any savings. And in my head, I was thinking, you're never going to see a saving on a registered manager because the CQC aren't that forward yet. So even if you've implemented a registered manager chatbot, you're never going to be able to get rid of your registered manager under current, legislation and expectations under the framework. So there needs to be a bit of realism as well as whatever we're doing when we're implementing something.
It's back to your point on measurement, isn't it? You kind of, if you set out with a false measure, I'm going to save 10 people that's never ever remotely feasible, then you can't be upset afterwards when that doesn't happen. It's kind of, it's thinking about back to the problem. What problem? How's it going to solve and make my business better? And then secondly, how do I know that it's actually delivered a result? And it may be the result is in non-tangible things like staff satisfaction. If you've got staff that are more engaged, happy, and feel better supported, that's going to have an impact on your business and the quality of the care that you provide, surely.
Well, technology made the world 24/7, 365, and that's an expectation now. And society's changed over the past 2 decades. Look at it from where we used to have normal working hours, Monday to Friday on shops and stuff like that. Things are shut down. We're a growing population. We have less resources. Healthcare is 24, social care is 24/7, 365. When we look at when we do things online ourselves, so if I'm going, should we say, on holiday, I'll probably look late in the evening at 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night while I'm sitting there. And sometimes I want to find information straight away. And investing in AI chatbots that can answer a lot of these inquiries can help customers convert for businesses as well. Having that non-sleeping entity that can interact with your customers, your potential customer bases, and your workforce is paramount, because that allows you to operate efficiently. And we also have to factor in our own human habits. Hands up on this podcast if you've ordered something off Amazon Prime and paid a little bit more just because it was going to be there the next day.
Yeah, I have a new table coming today. The exact same reason, yeah. For the weekend.
Did you need it for today?
I need it for my cup of coffee tomorrow morning, so I can sit out at my little table rather than taking the covers off the big table. So it's absolutely really important.
He didn't need it because he could have a barbecue tomorrow. So
exactly. He's got an outdoor veranda as well. But this is the thing, right? We have to look at our own habits as humans and look at how that, like, we inflect on it, but also reflect that on others as well. So as a family member who's had to recently source care for a granddad who's just passed away, but all the end of life stuff and everything like that, we was looking at information at sort of 2-3 a.m. when we're awake, was going through, and it's, someone will be back to you in working hours, and you're like, oh, God, if it's probably something they could have answered, like a chatbot could have answered that in 2 minutes. And having that sort of ability to having a 24-hour business, no one's saying humans have got to operate 24 hours, but the business still can. And you have to understand that we say, we want the work-life balance, and but some of these jobs can be automated. But I always go back to the classic supermarket checkouts. Everyone straight away was like, oh my God, freaking out, they're going to take away all the jobs. Now you need more people to operate them. So it's like, they're breaking down all the time. You still have to have people that monitor like the actual mechanics of the system. So just because you've got automation on some fronts doesn't truly replace everything, and that's what we have to understand. There's no AI business in a box that someone's going to say, I want to create a CQC regulated care company, and it goes, sure thing, pops out all the forms, policies and everything, all the invoicing. It's never going to happen. They're all operating completely differently. I mean, one of my biggest things I see at the moment, which does concern, is, as Mark said, people using things like ChatGPT for care plans, just submitting loads of information. Usually the free model as well. There's now sitting on some American servers somewhere building profiles on people, because no one ever sits and asks, why are they giving me this for free? What am I getting out of the reward? Like, what's the reward? And where we see such a reluctance to use it appropriately, but inappropriately, it seems quite easy. So people will go and use like an AI to change their face, to not realizing that now they're in a profiling database as well, probably in somewhere like China. But they're like, I don't want to use a legitimate version for my care business, one that I pay for, that's professionally registered, but they'll go and download that and put their residence on there to make them look like a cat.
Yeah, and if somebody found out, if you imagine the reputational risk, if somebody finds out that their data is being shared and used in an open forum, you'd go potty, wouldn't you?
People
if it's one of your, they just, you can't do that. So I think the danger of doing nothing and letting people do their own thing is actually you open up a Pandora's box and more issues than you do if you put something in place which has your controls that sat around it. And I think the other bit as well, which always surprises me, is we capture how many logs are taken per resident per day. And it's between 300 and 400 logs per day. So if you take a residential care home with 30 beds and take a midpoint of 350 logs per day, that's over 72,000 bits of information being added per week. Then you've got, I don't know, how many care plans, 10, 12 care plans. Then you've got all the risk analysis. Then you've got all of the compliance frameworks. And then you've got all of your own templates, process to follow. How do people cope? There's just so much. Actually, you've got to think about this. Is this fair? You've got all of this information, all of these rules, and how do you keep on top of it all? And I think that's very difficult. So actually, there's a sense here to say, how do you help people to become more effective, and how do you reduce some of the pressure that sits around just having to keep on top of what is an inordinate amount of information?
One of the things we experience outside, and I call it multiple rabbit holes. So there's multiple rabbit holes of development that loads of different companies are all going down to try and save the same, essentially solve the same problem. And what one of my concerns with this is where there's no regulation and a lot of people are looking at their own improvised ways to try and save problems, they're actually creating more issues as a sector going forward, because naturally through R&D people encounter problems with development, but we're finding problems with legislation and boundaries and data sharing, which now becomes a wider problem. Whereas if it was more focused to key businesses like yourselves, us, other providers who make AI and specialize in that realm, and there was some good guidance around what the expectations were and the regulations in the first hand, a lot of this problem would have been solved by now. But for instance, people go and use ChatGPT because they hear their competitors using AI, as we said earlier. There's no guidance on there that says don't use open source AI because it might share your data. So they go and do it, share the data, get sanctioned for it, and they go, and then it's like, then it becomes a problem for everyone else of don't do this, don't do that.
Yes.
That I find, especially when it comes to AI, it's there for a definite purpose, but I don't believe every business would benefit from it at this moment in time. Some businesses who aren't using like data intelligently in that capacity, or like for instance a personal assistant who's got one service user who they're supporting, probably won't need to benefit from AI that much. Certainly when you start expanding, I would say getting 10 employees plus is when you might want to start looking at a business that using some form of AI. It doesn't take a large growth, but realistically the benefits are there from the early stages of business growth, and applying and adopting AI at the right time for the right purpose will help. As you said, Stephen, you're analyzing in excess of 70,000 records a week. What
for one care home,
one home. What human could sit there and do that? And this is the thing. You have to look at scale of data that's coming in. You have to look at the data types and what you're trying to achieve with that data. And sometimes businesses start collecting what we call like erroneous data. So they're taking stuff that they don't really need to collect, but the more they collect, they have to account for. So it's making sure you're taking that appropriate and necessary data as well, and making sure that you've got your good retention policies, because otherwise, I'm not sure if you got like what your retention periods are internally, Stephen, but every company seems to have a different view on this. But if the more data you retain, the more you have to analyze and account for and factor. And Mark, I would imagine your organization has a significant wedge of data that it has to analyze. And with businesses like that it's near on impossible to have the accuracy levels required through human intervention to manually check and amend that data on an appropriate basis. And so I would always recommend getting AI in early, but making sure you identify what you're trying to achieve with that AI and then trying to embed it into your way of working. And the thing I would always suggest as well, making sure it's an AI model that's right for your business, regardless of who it is or where it's from. It might take a bit of time sitting there for a couple of weeks doing demos and stuff like that, but just because it works for one company won't necessarily work for you.
And I think part of that also is adaptability and flexibility with that tool. So we will know if we're in a care home group that's, say, of a decent size, some of those care homes will have very different needs to others. Even within the same organization, you'll have some which are very high performing, top of their game, very established team. They're looking more at, analysis and trends and future mitigation and proactivity. They're kind of looking to the future as to how they continue to drive and move their business forward. Whereas you could have another care home that's perhaps in remedial measures or just come out of them, where it's looking very much at, are we doing our logs? Are we writing our care plans in good English? Are we using non-pejorative language? Have we done a care plan update for this resident for the last month? Kind of more basic things. It's just saying how, so you can use the AI tool in different contexts. One is about making sure you got the basics in place, but the same AI tool is being used in a different place to help really drive that high performing environment, which they're very much capable of doing. So people are on different trajectories, even within the same groups, different needs, and it has to cater for that. Otherwise, there's a risk that it is too generic and too controlling. It doesn't actually become fit for purpose for your group.
You touched on a really good point there in terms of group services, because historically it's always been one thing rolled out across all services within that group. And actually, you are very right that actually, if you're rolling something out AI based, actually, is that relevant for that service or that the people that are living there or that staff team? And I think if we're using it to complement the staff team we've already got, actually, they all have different skill sets.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see kind of how, when we roll out further in terms of different models of AI, what that looks like. I think the only thing for me is, we speak a lot around, ChatGPT or, systems like Health Automated or Quik AI, but there is so many other tools out there. And actually, what do you want to achieve? Which I know we've spoken about, but actually listening to you there, Jack, around actually, if you're a single person or you've got one person you're supporting with a very small staff team, actually, how can you use AI to, improve communication? Actually, could you use something like Canva, which is now powered all through with AI, to create newsletters for your relatives or for your staff team? Could you use something, to create podcasts or infographics or, even something like Excel, like a AI Excel version? Actually, if you've got small amounts of data, you might not need to invest in something really heavily, but actually you could then start manipulating some of that data, like, we've spoken about the trend analysis and how you want to move forward. I think there definitely needs to be more awareness of what's out there, or a bit more research in terms from providers of what's out there that could benefit them.
Yeah, it's quite overwhelming. I don't know if you look on LinkedIn and they keep seeing stories from people saying the top 50 AI tools you need to use. I'm like, 50? Like, I'm going to use 50. We use 2 or 3, So again, it's this idea that, there's so much noise and you get thrown all this. You need to use these. These are the most important. You're like, come on, be realistic. It actually puts people off because it's overwhelming. And you think, I can't work out which of those 50 are going to help me or my business. It's like, that's not realistic. We need to narrow the field a little bit and start becoming a bit more tailored over how we present things to people rather than just presenting products at them, AI products, as though somehow that'll revolutionize their life.
I think some of that, though. Oh, go on, Jack.
So I was just going to say, I agree, especially where you've got multiple tools being thrown. It becomes like that subscription model where people sign up to multiple different tools, forget how many they're signed up to, keep paying for pointless subscriptions, and it becomes expensive. All because they're not selecting the right one. So they're trying to actually replicate and create the flows they're trying to stop. But they're actually using more resources to try and do it. It's actually counterproductive.
And you forget it's only a few quid. You forget about it, but actually that again just adds to that cost complexity and perception that this is a fad as opposed to something which can actually have a meaningful impact upon my job and my business.
I think it brings us full circle into that whole sheep mentality. I think there's loads of people out there that know a bit about AI that are then pushing all these products in terms of you should be using this, and everybody's thinking, oh, well, if they're using it, I should use it, or always telling me these are the top 20, I should go and get those top, and then it just almost spurs people into going to download those and use them, even though they don't necessarily need to use them, or they don't know how to use them, but are using them inappropriately.
Yeah.
I think the other thing we'll see is loads of AI organisations coming into the sector because they know that social care won't be fully equipped to deal with it, or they'll be, anybody can join a registered managers forum, because they're not 100% vetted. You don't submit your CQC details and bits and pieces. But it'd only take for a supplier to go into one of those that's non-social care related, see all these managers talking about AI, blah, 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 and then join social care and very easily be able to pinpoint where those people work and upsell to them very, very easily. And that does worry me, the amount of cowboys that we might see come in.
Yeah.
And then it comes back to that whole what they're doing with the data. And I don't think, it's a massive risk.
And the government said
it's going to recommend doing that.
Yeah,
for anyone.
But the government said it's not going to regulate centrally. It's not going to regulate AI as a single thing. It's going to follow the American route. So the regulators will regulate the use of AI. So in other words, we're relying upon the CQC to tell us what we can and can't do.
But then the question is, the CQC data specialists who understand AI, or do they understand social
that's
regulation?
the problem, isn't it? I mean, I think they've got bigger fish to fry. They've just spent the last few years implementing a system that's not succeeded, and to a great expense. So they're probably not a focus area for us. So I think that does invite other people to come in. When you don't have ethical boundaries to work within, there's a risk that people come in who fly a bit, fast and loose.
No, you're absolutely correct. But we still have to understand we do have a law. We still have data laws and everything that we must still abide by. So there is some baseline that gives protection to providers, obviously making sure where data is. But I think more of it comes down to how the data is interpreted and processed, And I was sitting on a meeting about a year ago, and someone was saying that they personally believe that the AI-based providers should share their models in some capacity. No. Why would you go and give your R&D away just to, you've lost your product? And so there's got to be transparency with the way that the data works, but then there's equally trade secrets which protects the inner workings of how these things work as well. And I don't foresee you wouldn't see Windows or Microsoft turn around going, here's the operating system, here's everything, here's the keys, and so forth like that, just to try and get consumer reassurance. And this is where there's got to be some form of, I would say, like a kite mark that providers have to attain. So does the AI do this? Does it calculate in this way? Does it show bias towards? And they just have to show some form of regulatory compliance towards that flow. And that should be more than enough. But this is where reputation comes in as well. So reputable businesses that operate in the AI field, great. They'll get that consumer reassurance and that sheep factor will come. But if you're a new provider that's entering the market, people will always look with some form of skepticism, especially when you come in with we're not going to charge anything for the software, or we're going to do this, because straight away, I'm not sure about you guys, but my alarm bell started going, you want health data for free?
I know. I'm bearing in mind, this is a consumption-based model, right? We use tokens, input-output tokens. That cost every time you ask a question, particularly complex questions, it's costing money. So how on earth can I be doing that when, in our case, AWS, Bedrock, and Anthropic are charging me a packet of money for the questions you're asking, but I don't charge you any money? Hang on a second, there's something's not working here.
I know, of course, and this is the thing, and people don't question it. Sometimes it's too good to be true. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand some freemium models where they'll give you, as you say, a few tokens to generate something to show you what it's like as like a loss leader. Understandable. Then you've got to pay for the upgrade, if you will. But this is where there's the problem of I wouldn't say it's a lack of trust, because everyone wants AI. What I would say is more of a naivety to the AI that they need and require. And because a lot of people are trying to rush to the market now because of the buzzwords AI, you're starting to see things like chatbots that are just chat GPT in a closed environment, just chucked in there with an LLM, and it's like, hi. I'm not going to say name, but that's exactly what it is. Or Copilot dressed up as a chatbot just put into their app. And realistically, is it actually doing what an AI would do or should do, or is it just a bolt on to try and say that we've got that kite mark as well? And personally, when it comes to AI, I genuinely feel businesses need to be confident, and they should ask questions. The providers should be happy to answer them. They don't have to answer all of it public, but they can answer it with the customer. So how is my data weighted? How is it stored? How do we know that it's not making bias? And any reputable provider should be able to answer these questions quite comfortably. And that's where the reassurance comes in. Obviously, we can't tell you that the API server calls and how many API calls are doing XYZ, because that's realistically not your concern. You know,
I don't
but
think it
what is
helps.
your,
I don't think it helps them
it
either,
doesn't.
does it? I mean, it's like what's going to impact me? I mean, our building blocks are our databases and servers are in London. We use AWS Bedrock. We use a provider who's covered under the UK-US data bridge, so we know the data's secure legally, and all data is immediately deleted from the LLM.
There you go.
So there's building blocks. It's fully GDPR compliant. It's compliant with the UK-US data bridge. All our servers, databases, etc., are London-based. It uses AWS Bedrock, and nothing at all is kept by the LLM for training or for storage.
See,
And that's kind of those are the building blocks for me. There's other stuff, but you're right. API calls and all the rest of it, I think, it's a technical question, but it's not really something that's going to change your decision of whether you use it or not.
You're right, and this is the thing. People ask a lot more questions that they don't know the answers to themselves when they're going through a procurement, which then causes more ambiguity, because then they're like, I don't know what you've just said, so now I've got to go and look into that. And there should just be, I believe, from the regulator, some form of flow chart that you've just got, like, say, 10 questions you've got to ask a provider. Does it conform to this standard? Does it meet that standard? That should be enough reassurance from, and then having some framework that people stick to.
Yeah.
That would solve that issue entirely, in my opinion, because people would have that reassurance that their care management software does meet that criteria. Who assesses that criteria? That's the question. But then ultimately, it allows all of the digital systems to adapt and grow in their own way. You're not completely laser focused and locked into one way of working, so all of the providers are working exactly the same way, just with a different logo, basically. There's got to be some element and market edge, and I strongly agree that when it comes to the regulatory side, this isn't a massive problem. I feel it's just being made a massive problem just because too many people try and get involved and ask things that they're not really sure about in some capacities. And it really does convolute it, because we have standard data protection laws. There's a lot of laws in the UK that protect data processing and so forth anyway. And it's just ensuring that, like anything, it's regulated or has a kite mark that adheres to.
I mean, big thing with AI is data is going to America. Okay, you need to be aware of that. Most people would work under GDPR and the UK EU legislation. And secondly, is your data being kept, stored, and used for training? And that's the big bit. So you got to know that. If everything else, I think, is secondary. But is my data is going to America? Are you allowed to do that? And secondly, when it's there, what happens? Are they training it? Are they using it? Are they storing it? If they are, then I think you've got a potential problem, and you need to understand that. After that, it kind of allows you to have a bit more of a level playing field of understanding what's happening. Because otherwise, the risk is you introduce AI to risk, but it actually increases the risk, but just to a different medium.
Of course. I mean, people can't always foresee risks, and they say, well, AI is potentially uncapped, its possibilities are endless. But they said that when they first created a car and thought you couldn't go above 20 miles an hour. And this is the thing, now you have airbags and all stuff that go on, and safety features as things grow, is my point. You learn as you grow, as long as it's safe to do so. And obviously making sure you're not going rogue and creating new ways of working with live data, but that comes down to the common sense of the people developing it. But then equally, we live in a world where common sense doesn't appear that common. So it should just be called sense, right? You either have it or you don't. But this is the problem, and it's one of them sayings: too many chefs and not enough cooks. There's too many people trying to take the lead on what's right and what's wrong, and it convolutes a lot of it for like everyone else. And where we work in a very disjointed society anyway, with local authority legislations from boundary to boundary, it just makes it more complex. And realistically, if you was just to put something like a kite mark on there, like an AI kite mark, that any software in the UK that uses AI has to adhere to a standardized kite mark, that would solve a lot of this issue. We are one of the biggest AI developing countries in the world. People don't see that. We are a tech powerhouse, but yet we can't even sort this problem internally. It says a lot, really, doesn't it? Welcome to the UK.
There's a little bit of the Wild West at the moment because the development's happening at such a ridiculous pace, isn't it? And they're all competing with each other, all the sort of major providers, and so therefore things are happening at such fast pace. You can understand why it's quite hard to regulate that because of that level of change, particularly when you've got divergent views between how the EU wants to regulate AI versus what America and the UK want to do. It all feels a little bit loose at the moment, but that's why I think it's more important that as providers we have some sort of ethical, whether it's a kite mark or whether it's a set of ethical standards, that you say this is what we do to ensure in the absence of that framework or legislation, we will still say what are the boundaries and rules we will adhere to, and we promise to be responsible in that respect. And I think that's really important that we have that underlying thing. For as long as we're not officially got a kite mark to adhere to, we can say actually there are certain standards we know you should adhere to, we will do that.
I totally agree.
Because then if a few of us do that, that brings the bar up and says actually we've set it. We don't need someone else to tell us what to do. We know what we need to do and we will adhere to that, and you can trust us.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, you've got the AI pledge being built in the background, haven't you? And there's a few other sort of things going on to try and bring that standard, which is great. Yeah. But it shouldn't have to be left to the people to create the solution to their problem to be able to enter the market, right? Do you see what I mean? It's the government's known for years that these problems are there, and they've not foreseen that. Well, with the introduction of needing big data, essentially, how do we make big data safe amongst small companies? And it's just one of them things that people don't foresee, but you're right, technology moves so quickly, and to put regulation in early can actually confine development.
Yes, and there's very differing views over what they should and shouldn't do as well. So it's hard to put legislation and guidelines in place, but no one can actually agree on what they should be in the first place. So.
Exactly. I don't think we're ever going to get this answer, are we? I think they're just going to leave it to 100 years and go, oh, yes, not someone to say, I mandated that years ago. But no, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Unfortunately, we're coming to an end. We've been going for the best part of an hour now. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you very much, both.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us.
Have you got any closing remarks, Stephen? You want to tell us a bit about Quik AI? Tell the listeners on where to go and find some information.
Go to our website. It's quik-ai.com. I think the proof is always in the pudding, so we won't say too much, but ultimately we will show you how it works, how it integrates with your system. We work on doing a pilot, so we allow people to get it within, say, one care home, see how it works, put those measurements in place that we talked about, and the proof is in the pudding. If you see that there are changes to your operations, it's helping to make you more efficient, it's helping you to become more compliant, then we know that that product will roll out to the rest of your group, whether that's another 2 homes or another 20 homes. It doesn't really matter, but we believe it's about entering softly and gently, making sure it fits in with the cadence of your organization, culturally it's accepted, and then gradually expanding that out as well. So it's not about a big bang approach. It's very much does this fit and feel right? Is it giving me the benefits that I perceived I would get? And if it does, then you will roll it out further and we will help you and support you with that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephen. We'll put Stephen's LinkedIn profile on the podcast as well. So if you want to get in touch with Stephen to discuss Quik AI, please do. But for myself, Jack White, and from Mark, I'll let Mark say his part. But thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, just echoing what you said. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Stephen. And until next time.
Have a great sunny weekend.
And take care, everyone.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you.